Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Ware. We're bringing you day 5 of the Sandhill Artists Collective virtual holiday gallery tours. Today we're going to be looking at the Penland Gallery. That is not too far from us, about an hour's drive or so away from Asheville, out in the Spruce Pine area. And having said that, I am now going to turn things over to the Shack founder, Louise Glickman, and let her lead off.
Well, hi, everybody. So I am thrilled to be introducing Penland today and to be welcoming all of you here for what promises to be a very exciting presentation. Many of you have been on before, so I try to change up my introduction just a little bit each day. And today I want to tell you about really some of the very exciting things that have happened since we started this gallery, these gallery presentations. First of all, we're very happy to say that not only have they been well attended, in our opinion, for a first time effort, they have been well attended each day. So everyone who has attended, lots of you have been on every day, but there's always a handful of new people. And the exciting aspect of this, most exciting, is that about 30% or more of our audience comes from outside Asheville. Today, we have a large group from Louisville, Kentucky, thanks to my good friend Jane Emke, and we're glad to have all of you on board. But for the galleries that we're trying to support, this is extremely meaningful because these are new markets. This is new awareness of the art scene here in Asheville. And it also allows us to put a good face forward with the tourism and convention group here in our community, who are the only people who have any money these days. So we thank you for coming. The Sandhill Artists Collection is an extension of artists and art enthusiasts who live in the western part of our county, but now we have expanded throughout our region and, as I mentioned, nationally. So we're very excited about the progress we're making. Thanks for joining in. I personally go to Penland as much as I possibly can. You're going to meet Catherine Grimley in a minute, and she will remind you that I have taken any number of classes there, and as soon as COVID is over, I expect to be back. I consider time at Penland to be life-changing for me. And in fact, it is Penland that brought me here to Western North Carolina. I can talk about that with you all personally later, but I am totally indebted to them, to Jean, who was the executive director before, and who sits on our committee for Shack, and also to the trips to Japan and Denmark and Cuba that I have taken with Penland. So without any more from me, Catherine, it's all on your shoulders, and also you, Shae.
Great. Well, thank you, Louise. Thanks for such a nice introduction. But it's like you're an old Penland friend, so this is like just a gathering of people from Penland. So I should introduce myself. I'm Catherine Gremley, and I'm the director of the Penland Gallery. Have been for many years. I'm sort of an institution at this point. I came to Penland in 1981 as a student and never could figure out a reason to leave, and found myself in a really terrific job that I love to this day. Tonight I'll be presenting with artist Shae Bishop, who I'll introduce in a few more minutes. But I just want to say thank you to the Sandhill Artists Collective for the invitation to participate. I really appreciate Louise, all the work that Louise and Bob and Daryl and Andrea have been putting into this project. So that's great. So I'm going to turn on my share screen and we're going to hope for the best here. Let's see, click a few buttons, get going, share, and play from the start. Okay, well, here we go. Let's see. Okay. So for those of you who may not have visited Penland School, well, I'm sorry, but you need to change that, or the gallery, I'll start with a little bit of a background about it. So you're looking at the actual gallery building, and we're located in Mitchell County, which is just about an hour northeast of Asheville. The building that houses the gallery is called Horner Hall, and is a historic building, which originally housed the Appalachian School, which was an Episcopal boarding school. It closed in the early 60s and Penland School acquired the property. The building was extensively renovated in 2015, which you will see later in slides. And for the last couple of years, we have hosted and now own this beautiful sculpture by Haas Haley. So it's a pretty fantastic landmark to know that you've arrived at Penland when you see that 25-foot high sculpture in the front yard. Penland School of Crafts was founded in 1929 and is an international center for craft education. The school offers classes in 15 classroom studios, and they run from 1 week to 8 weeks sessions during the spring, summer, and fall. In the winter, we have a winter residency program, which is time in the studio without instruction. We've been on a COVID hiatus, like most people, but are hoping to resume our classes in the spring, and we are offering those. We also have several residency programs, and many people who have been in those programs end up as permanent residents in the area. So familiar names of artists. Now, Harvey Littleton was an instructor, not a resident, but Mark Pizer, Christina Cordova, Haas Haley, but honestly, there's hundreds of fantastic artists who settled in the Penland area because they came to the school and, like myself, just never found a good reason to leave. You're looking over the shoulder of Horner Hall, and you can see the school in the distance in the background, and it's a 1 mile horseshoe loop, and it's about 600 acres. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're seeing one of our newest buildings, which is called Northlight. Just a portion of it. It's actually a very big building. And below that at the top of it houses our photo studio, which is state of the art. And the bottom level, which you see in the picture there, is our new paper studio. So let's see. So just to give you an idea of all the scope of our what we do, we have the Robin and John Horn Exhibition Gallery, which is the new space. We have the Focus Gallery, which is a small format space and hosts about 4 to 6 exhibitions. The Robin and John Horn Gallery is usually about 4 invitational exhibitions annually. And let's see, the Lucy Morgan Gallery is our main sales gallery, where we represent an average of about 150 artists a year. The artists in our gallery all have a Penland affiliation, which is a pretty remarkable pool of people. So that means that they've been an instructor, a resident artist, part of our core fellowship program, or a past student. It's not work that's made on campus generally, except for probably the resident artist work and core fellowship work. It's mostly being made back in their studios. When they're on campus, people are mostly making experimental work, learning new techniques. So it's not work that we show in our gallery. The Visitor Center Gallery is a space where we tell Penland's historic story or talk about current programming. And we do that through objects from the archives, or we pull things from the community and current programming, and that changes annually. But it's a really great way for people who've never been to the school to get a bigger understanding of what we're all about. They kind of wonder like why we're so far off the main road and like what the heck we're doing out in the woods. So I wanted to share just a few images from past shows in the Horn Gallery. We do not have a show in the Horn Gallery right now. We had one this spring, which unfortunately was hung and ready, and then COVID shut us down. So we shared it virtually. This is Christina Cordova. I'm sure most of you recognize her work. This is from 2016. It was the first largest work from her brand new kiln that fired much larger. And then these series of drawings that she did with clay on cardboard. This is a show called Further Evidence, which was from 2019. It was co-curated by Catherine Ellis, who is a textile artist from Western North Carolina. And these are all instructors from Penland who have made a subtle or not so subtle shift to working with the natural dyes over the past number of years. It's really a huge resurgence of natural dyes. This is a massive takeover by Haas Haley and a solo show from 2019. This series of 5 sculptures and 2 wall pieces from that body of work called Correction Line. This was a show that was very special to me. This was our final show of 2019 called Tradition of Excellence. And I co-curated this show with Hiroko Yamada, who is a Japanese metalsmith. She divides her time between Madison, Wisconsin and Japan, and was kind enough to tour with me and host with me some of the Japanese artists that I got to meet. And we brought their work to the United States. We've had several shows where we put together the show at Penland and it went to Japan. And I think Louise might have seen one of those shows. And then this was our way of paying back that kindness by showing their work, but really we won that lottery. This show was quite remarkable and contained the work of, I think, 4 of Japan's living national treasures. And it left Penland and traveled to the Ornamental Metal Museum in Memphis. That's a mouthful. This is our small format focus gallery space. And these space it shows are intended to show a larger body of work by some of our artists, and they're not meant to be conceptual exhibitions. And all the work for these shows are for sale. This is a show we had recently of Shane Farrow paired with photographer Deb Stoner, whose work is quite remarkable. Her work is done on a scanner. So it's these highly detailed close-up views of curated or arranged floral pieces. And of course, Shane is one of the United States' finest flame work artists. Shoko Terayama was a resident artist at Penland years ago, and her work is highly collectible. And she's a good friend, and she's had work in our gallery for many years, lives up in New York now after she finished the residency. We have a pretty serious commitment to beautifully designed functional work. So every once in a while, we have a show that focuses on that to make sure everybody recognizes that we love functional work as well. This show is called Well-Designed Objects, and we got the chance to knoll everything and make it look very tidy. But you'll see work from people like Andrew Hayes and, oh gosh, Haas Haley in the front, Boris Bally. But it was a really successful show, and it gets people excited about the kind of work that artists are doing in the functional realm. Annually, we have a show called where we have a mixture of emerging and mid and late career artists doing contemporary jewelry. We always try to introduce some interesting techniques and artists that are not well known, along with some of our absolute favorites, which you may recognize, Anna Johnson, Laura Wood. It's just, we always enjoy it. There's a little bit of David Clemens' work in the upper right-hand corner. The Lucy Morgan Gallery, which is named after the founder of Penland School, who was devoted to selling the work of mountain crafts. So it just seems fitting to name this space after her. But this is our sales gallery, and it's housed in the older part of the main building, has a broad range of media, functional and sculptural work, and a broad range of prices. We are in this space also, we're really committed to showing the work of emerging artists as well as mid and late career artists. And I wanted to show you a few special pieces from here. This is just a few pieces that we have in the gallery currently. Adam Whitney, who's in the upper left-hand corner, is a new resident artist, and he does these exquisite raised vessels. Lisu Vega, the necklace in the middle, is from Florida. Of course, Janine Marchand, Ellie Annan, and Nate Cotterman with the lamp. But these are, it's just, we have such remarkable work and feel very fortunate to have that. There's another piece by Shane Farrow, and of course our favorites, John and Kate Littleton, who have been such remarkable supporters of the school. We are also really proud that we work with museum curators to place work in museum permanent collections around the country. So most recently, this piece by Annie Lemansky that you may have seen at the Asheville Art Museum recently was purchased for the Crystal Bridges permanent collection. And I understand that it was packed and moved and on its way for installation there this past week. And then 2 pieces of Haas Haley's sold from, well, all the work from the Correction Line show sold, but these 2 pieces were placed in North Carolina museums. This one that you see was just recently installed at the North Carolina Museum of Art in their sculpture garden. And another piece will be installed at the Mint Museum Randolph outside, hopefully fairly soon. We were very fortunate that we were already had a really well-established and pretty smooth running an active e-commerce site when COVID hit and everybody pivoted to get totally virtual. But we moved everything online this spring and made that site way more robust. And we pretty much maintain about 1,000 pieces on the site that are available for purchase. Right now, the Penland Gallery is open by appointment only, so that we can keep the appointments small and intimate and limit the number of people. We are going to keep doing that on Fridays and Saturdays this month. And then after that, you can call, and hopefully, depending on the weather and availability, we're happy to meet people there. And all the work that's on our site is also on view in the brick and mortar gallery. With a wide range of work, we do have spaces that are devoted to the very accessible pieces of functional crafts. So this is just another space in our gallery that we have set up in these vignettes of work. Although our 2020 exhibition programming was completely thwarted and side-railed by the pandemic, we have been able to reschedule several artists for 2021 and 2022, including our presenter, Shae Bishop, thankfully. So Shae will be part of a 2-artist exhibition next spring. And this is a series of exhibitions that I began curating in 2016. The series concept is based on a metaphorical conversation between the 2 artists. And as a curator, I'm in the habit of following one artist's studio practice and often find connections and threads to other artists whose work sparks this idea of a conversation. Their work might be in parallel to each other or coming at a concept from 180 degrees from each other. I like lively conversations. So the goal for the pairing of this work is to enhance viewers' perspective about the individual pieces. So I was really pleased that Shae was interested in being part of an exhibition. I became aware of his work in 2014 after he moved to the Penland area to assist Christina Cordova. And I was intrigued then, as now, by his remarkably singular work, which you'll really enjoy. Although he's moved in and out of the Penland area, I'm glad to say that he is back, has a house here now, and I've never lost sight of his projects and was so glad that he was willing to work on a new body of work for the gallery. So knowing that Shae's work is, I'll say obliquely narrative and unconventionally autobiographical, it was important for me to keep this mythic aspect of his work as a primary concept for the exhibition. You may have seen the work by photographer and collage artist Corn Wagon Thunder at the Asheville Art Museum's inaugural exhibition, Appalachia Now, last winter. Corn has been working on a series of self-portraits that explore identity. I've known Corn for several years while she was living and working in the area. but she recently moved out to the Southwest to pursue a master's degree in photography, not her first master's. She's just remarkable in pursuing education and furthering her studio practice. These are sort of representative of work that she's planning to include in the exhibition. She works both with photography and with collage. And I want to share this video. I'm going to hope it's going to work smoothly. We'll go for it because I wanted Corn to have a chance to say things in her own words. She didn't record this particularly for us, but I think it speaks well to the work that she'll include.
Hi, I'm Corn Wagon Thunder, and I'm here in my studio in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My work reflects a quest for the discovery of self by examining personal mythologies and has recently relied heavily on the use of symbolism and polysemy. I'm interested in the use of language to elevate the visual, to provide wayfinding, but also to reinforce the riddle that I present to the viewer. Rebirth of Agency is about the myth of the so-called battle axe, a pejorative term applied to forceful, domineering older women, often portrayed as the angry wife wielding a frying pan at her errant husband. I'm thinking a lot about perimenopause and menopause and the emotional impacts that this physical process has on an aging woman, especially in a culture obsessed with youth and a society that has little tolerance for the expression of female anger. In my photograph, the woman mourning the loss of her fecundity embraces a domestic symbol to claim her freedom and agency, with a bit of dark humor. In the image, as befits the nature of light, is on one level related to the old movie trope of the drunk guy at the party that puts the lampshade on his head. He's consumed too much of a good thing and now looks the fool for it. But more deeply, it's a comment on domestic consumerism. When I made this photograph, I had just moved into a furnished cabin that was filled with so many lamps, and I kept asking myself what could be the motivation for accumulating all these lamps. As modern humans in a consumerist society, we attempt to fulfill that which is lacking in our lives by accumulating objects, yet despite all of our consumption, our inner light still does not shine. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I thought that you might enjoy that. But you should go to her website, and she has a really beautiful website, and you might see more of the work and the pieces that she was referring to. But now I want to turn over the whole presentation to Shae. He's the meat of this presentation, and he's really does remarkable work, and I'm looking forward to you knowing more about him, and hopefully that we'll all be out of this quarantine time so that you can come in person starting next March and come see his exhibition.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And thank you to Louise and Bob. Also a shout out to my friends from Louisville, Kentucky, the place where I grew up. This piece was my first ceramic garment, and it's titled simply Coat. I made this piece about 10 years ago, and ever since, my artwork has involved putting patterned ceramics on people or drawing people and patterns on ceramics. This whole line of exploration centers on the relationship between textiles and ceramics, and that is really the meat of what I'm conceptually interested in the artwork that I make. Clay and cloth share this tactility and familiarity. And for many people, these are two of the primary materials that touch our bodies in our daily lives in the form of dishes, floor tiles, clothes, blankets, and many other things. This piece, Coat, was made of hundreds of small porcelain tiles that were laced together with dyed cotton string. And the motifs that you see across the tiles were stenciled and sprayed by building up multiple layers of color. Every culture in history has made these patterns that visually order their world and contribute to their sense of identity as a culture. And ceramics and textiles are some of the earliest and most important venues for creating and displaying patterns. I think of motifs in a pattern as similar to letters in an alphabet, where they're communicating non-verbally, and the precise meanings of those patterns are always shifting across time and place. And I think of clothing itself as another visual language, where the things that we wear are always communicating something about ourselves, whether we mean them to or not. This is a detail showing the coat up close, how I rolled out the thin porcelain tiles, about a 16th inch for the smaller tiles and closer to an 1/8 for the larger ones. Making this piece started an endless line of research for me that's continued up to today. My work's deeply influenced by history, and I'm a huge nerd for the past. Taking it back to the beginning, the ancient Egyptians actually made ceramic garments in the form of these ceremonial faience bead dresses. I'm interested in how the process of weaving threads into fabric or laying clay tiles in a roof are a pattern generation system in and of themselves. And here we see on the left a weaving draft, which is the guide a weaver follows to create a certain kind of cloth. And on the right is the tiled interior of a mosque in Uzbekistan, which utilizes an identical pattern. And in nature, too, we see these unit-based pattern systems. I've always loved snakes and reptiles since childhood, and nature is a constant source of inspiration in my work as well. I've been studying this kind of work for a few months when I got the opportunity to go to Hungary to work at the International Ceramics Studio. And when I first arrived in Budapest, the taxi drove past this building and I was completely blown away. So I started researching secessionist architecture in the 19th century, and I found that many of those architects used glazed tiles to create this kind of patterned skin or garment for the roofs of their buildings. I also learned that the ceramic design in these buildings is often influenced by the folk textiles of the area. This was so fascinating to me, and when I returned home, I started making these sketches. I began making a series of pieces that merged the figure and garment together into flexible busts covered by geometric patterns that abstract and merge many references together. The top of this bust is rigid ceramic, and the bottom is made up of small tiles which have wire loops embedded into the clay in the backs, so they were all laced together without being able to see the string from the front. In this next piece, I was fusing glass as well as making ceramic tiles and making a color and material gradient from clay to glass. I was thinking about how clay, glaze, and glass are made up of many of the same minerals. You know, it's really all silica and alumina and all these other things that we're working with. And it's really just a sliding scale of how much those materials melt. Here's a close-up where you can see the overglazed enamel work on the head of that piece. In this sculpture, I tailored fabric tightly over a ceramic bust and then draped that bust in tiles which were laced together, thereby trying to reverse the physical characteristics and make the cloth element stiff and the ceramic element flexible. And here's a detail of the fabric-covered head in that piece. Here are the tiles up close, which were slip cast in open-faced molds and then glazed and decaled with motifs that I drew. Every tile in this piece is double-sided, one side being black and white with an embossed surface and the other colored with glaze and decal. For my next studio research, I wanted to delve into Islamic geometry and pattern, so I went to Turkey to study the arts of the Ottoman Empire. I got a month-long residency in central Turkey, but first I spent a few days in Istanbul because it's kind of the cultural and historical capital of the country. And I was blown away by my experience while I was there. I found that these kaftans, the coats or robes worn by Ottoman sultans, were often made of silks with the same patterns seen on the tile work of their palaces and mosques. So I imagined it like this camouflage of royal power symbols, body merging with the environment. The silk fabric and the tiles here in these images share a motif called a chintamani, which originated in Tibet Buddhist imagery and traveled across Asia over a period of time to become popular in Turkey. The design believed to protect the wearer and imbue them with physical and spiritual fortitude. And in these panels of patterned geometric tiles made in Iznik, I started to see a reminiscence to American quilts. And that was an idea that I would end up coming back to later. So I left Istanbul and traveled into Cappadocia on the Anatolian Plateau for my residency. This area is famous for its otherworldly rock formations and its traditional cave dwellings. Here I lived and worked in ancient caves that were carved into the rock of the canyon in the town where I was living. This was my apartment during that residency. And when I returned home to my studio in Kansas City, I started a 2-year artist residency at Red Star Studios, and I made a body of work that was inspired by the time I'd spent in Turkey. This is a porcelain wall tile called Cappadocia Bill, and it's about how the gradual commercialization of Cappadocian culture reminded me of what happened in the American West over 100 years ago, when Buffalo Bill was hiring retired frontiersmen and Native Americans and putting them into his Wild West show. This tile is called Fraternal Patterns, and in the interior of the tile is a pattern of hexagonal Iznik tiles, which gradually transitions into that of a 19th century Kentucky quilt. The portraits are of 2 men I know personally who deeply represent their respective cultures for me. The left figure, Ali, is a poet and shop owner from Turkey, and the right figure, Wayne, is a ceramicist from Kentucky who taught me when I was growing up. Here you can see a detail of that piece that shows the pattern in detail. And this was done with China paint and a steel nibbed pen. I'd been making tiles for a number of years at this point, but for this series, I wanted to make these very big, thin, flat tiles that I could fire multiple times without risk of warping. And so I decided to start glazing directly on kiln shelves for this series, which you can see here. This next piece is called Trojan Tweed. And here I was exploring how many of the Turkish farmers that I met while there dressed in jackets and caps that had this stylistic origin in British clothing from a time when Western archaeologists were excavating and removing many Turkish antiquities. This piece, From the Ground Up, looks at the adoption and elaboration of utilitarian clothing styles by the upper classes. The fancy cowboy boot from the golden age of Hollywood Westerns and the elaborate applique boots worn by Ottoman sultans both evolved from versions of the plain riding boot originally. Tulip Folly is a 26-inch wall piece, and it deals with the movement of patterns and iconic motifs across cultures and the possibility of mix-ups and mistaken identities. The tulip is a traditional symbol in Turkey and has been for centuries, but it was imported into the Netherlands in the 17th century and has been perceived as a Dutch symbol in the West ever since. The title of this piece refers to the famous episode in the 1630s when there was this Dutch frenzy for tulips, and it led to a huge speculative bubble and ensuing financial collapse. The border patterns are glazed freehand with a brush in these tiles, and the illustrations are done with a steel nib pen dipped into an overglaze enamel. Each of these pieces is usually fired between 3 and 6 times. While in Turkey, I got to visit many gorgeous Ottoman mosques, and I found that a monochromatic stone exterior often belies a riot of spectacular color on the inside, with carpets and fantastic stained glass and, of course, glazed tile work, so that the architecture mirrors this spiritual principle of the body versus the spirit. And I was really moved by the effect of entering these buildings. So when I got back home, I started press molding hundreds and hundreds of little tiles here, kind of in an elongated hexagonal shape. And I made this piece. It's called The Space Within, and it explores that relationship that I spoke about between the interior and the exterior, and the reversal of viewers' expectations to some extent. The outsides of these tiles are bare porcelain, and they have a molded relief design. The interiors of the tiles are smooth and glazed with bright colors. I chose to display this piece hanging open so that the inside is fully visible. This was the last piece I made as a resident artist in Kansas City, and it kind of marked a transition in my life. After taking a ceramic workshop at the Penland School of Crafts, I decided to move to the area, and I started working for the figure sculptor Christina Cordova. I'd already been to Penland once before that to learn weaving, as shown here, and I'd been wanting to move to the area ever since. I drank the Kool-Aid and I fell in love with the mountains, and so I was very happy to make North Carolina my new home. Since I was working with Christina at my job and using clay, I decided to delve deeper into textiles in my own studio during this time. So I was learning new processes, including weaving and printing, pattern drafting, and sewing, to further my understanding of the relationship between these media. Among other things, I did a year-long project of making all my own shirts. In this shirt, I designed and screen printed the fabric, as well as patterning and sewing it. After a year of making fabric shirts, I decided it was time to get back to clay and make one out of porcelain. And this was the resulting piece. I displayed this finished ceramic shirt on a mannequin that I molded from my own body and upholstered. This way, even in the gallery, the piece could be shown on the body for which it was designed. Here you see it on myself, for whom it was tailored, and you see that the close fit, the working buttons on the front, the fold-over collar, these details, I feel, demonstrated my year of immersion in clothes making. The tiles were initially fired to cone 6 and then down fired to 03 so that I could use my favorite juicy turquoise glaze. Never gets old for me. And I was also continuing to make illustrated tiles during this time as well. Later in that year, I was accepted as a summer resident at the Archie Bray Foundation. So I moved out to Helena, Montana for 4 months. And this is the waistcoat that I made for my resident exhibition there. It's made up of similar decaled slip cast tiles to ones used in an earlier sculpture you've seen. And this piece I made with practical wearability in mind. It had a partially fabric back. It was extremely lightweight, and I wore it during my public presentations at the Bray. That piece also fell over during an earthquake that happened while I was in Montana, and some of the tiles cracked and broke apart. But fortunately, I always make plenty of extras, so I just laced in new ones, and good as new. That summer, I continued making a series of illustrated wall tiles. And these pieces use the figure of the hunter as an archetype to explore the effects of imperialism and militarism on patterns and visual culture. The left tile, Skin of the Beast, looks at how patterns and other elements of culture are adopted by one group of people through the conquest and subjugation of another, with the metaphor of the hunter wearing the fur of his prey. And in the right tile, Camouflage looks at the shifting patterns that contribute to the identity of rural Americans in places where I've made my home, from homemade quilts to manufactured camo, and how hunting and survival skills become tied up with militarism in that. This piece started as any other might have, but I was pretty unhappy with the way that the glaze turned out on the border. So I just decided to pop it into my friend's Cone 11 wood and salt kiln. And this is how it came out of that experience. Not exactly what I had in mind, but instead of throwing it away, I felt like there was something compelling about it. So I kept working on this piece. It was kind of a challenge to myself. And this is what I ended up with. Where do we go from here? I made this during a time when the country was in the midst of several different environmental catastrophes. And so that was heavy on my mind at the time. My partner was in New Orleans while hurricanes were flooding the Gulf Coast. And I was in Montana with wildfires raging all around me. And the air was choked with smoky haze for weeks. For a total shift now, I have made travel and documentation an essential part of my studio practice over the years. So around this time, my partner, Annie Evelyn, and I went to Cuba as a visual research project for collaborations that we were hoping to do. And while I was in Cuba, I was fascinated by the patterned cement tile floors, which were prevalent throughout the Caribbean, but are especially well preserved in the buildings of Cuba. Annie, my partner, and I both work with processes of assembling many small pieces and with the interplay of hard and soft materials. This is one of Annie's chairs, where you can see a little bit of the relationship between our work. So she and I started collaborating at this time to make furniture with upholstery covered in porcelain tile. In this piece, the wall panel is actually a squishy tiled backrest that you can lean against. And for me, this was just another variation on using ceramic as a textile. These benches were a commission for a private collection in Houston. No two tiles are the same across all three benches. They're tapered from front to back to achieve the curvature, and the pattern shifts incrementally from one tile to the next. So I mix separate batches of glaze for every row of tiles to achieve this color gradient. Here's a detail where you can see the gradual shifting in the color more easily. After this, I was invited to do a month-long residency in Bali, Indonesia, at the Gaia Ceramic Arts Center in Ubud. As soon as I arrived in Bali, I started going out into the jungle in search of reptiles, which is my other passion besides art. This here in the picture is a young reticulated python, which I found in a bamboo thicket. My work tends to be influenced heavily by my environment, and so I had this idea that I wanted to make a tiled garment, but based specifically on the concept of looking for snakes. So I press molded about 1,000 little porcelain tiles in the studio there at Gaia. And I gas fired the tiles to cone 10, with the uneven reduction in the kiln giving this wonderful range of color variation to the glaze that I used. Here I'm going to show you some behind the scenes process of how I make my tile garments. This is starting the pattern layout. Some of the tiles in the front of the waistband have extra holes so that I can sew on a closure for the front. Lacing the tiles together from the back is the most practical technique, but it can be hard to keep track of the pattern since the backs of the tiles are all white. The lacing material here is a braided polyethylene fiber, which is extremely high strength and is used as a fishing line. And here is the finished result. I called this piece Shorts to Wear While Looking for Pythons. And these were shown at the Textile Center in Minneapolis during an exhibition during NCECA of that year. Here's an in situ photo of me wearing my shorts. In making this piece, I wanted a garment to wear, both functional and symbolic, to bring luck and power while looking for pythons. Like the Monday hunter shirts of Mali, which are adorned with amulets, animal parts, and mirrors to demonstrate mastery of and protection from the physical and spiritual forces of the jungle, I created these shorts to help me in this quest. While they're seemingly impractical, the shorts are immensely comfortable in reality. When I put them on, they impart a feeling of transformation. The weight and the slight clinking sound make every movement feel intentional and focused as I move through the forest. Making these shorts has influenced the way that I am thinking about my current work. I've started to view my garments as kind of wearable self-portraits, and I'm focusing on specific function, personal narrative, and site-specific photo documentation in the work that I am making going forward from this piece. Earlier this year, before the pandemic, I got to do a residency at San Diego State University, and while there, I started 3 new pieces, which will be featured in my upcoming show at Penland. The next few images are of artworks in progress that will be featured in that show. This is a sketch on the left and a tile sample on the right for a piece called Waistcoat of Earthly Delights, which returns to the theme of snakes, but incorporates them directly into a garment and plays with viewers' perceptions and juxtaposing what one person might find sinister with what another person might find delightful. And these are samples for a ceramic rodeo ensemble of chaps and cowboy hat, which will be glazed with pink and turquoise floral motifs. This piece is about the cowboy as an American archetype of masculinity and how that image appeals to people in many different ways. The visual iconography of cowboy and Western wear has been adapted so many times, from the early cattle drives to the Hollywood Westerns, to Nudie Cohen's country music outfits, to contemporary gay culture. So that the cowboy as an image is now kind of a cultural chameleon that can signify so many different interpretations of masculinity. Here in these photos, I'm trying on some of my bisque-fired ceramic cowboy hats right out of the kiln. These pieces are slip cast, very thin and light, so they're comfortable to wear. And here is one after glazing, in the process of getting painted with overglazed enamels to create the pattern. My most recent piece is a follow-up directly on my Python shorts. It's inspired by the habitat of our local rivers, where I go to photograph hellbenders, which are an endangered species of giant salamander. Snorkeling in this area has given me a renewed love of the Appalachian ecosystems. I think our rivers can be just as interesting as a coral reef. And here you see me at the river on the left, and on the right is a photo of a hellbender that I took this summer. This one was almost 2 feet long. And here you see the finished garment. This piece is called A Swimsuit to Wear While Looking for Hellbenders. And you can see the visual references to the time that I spent at the river. I just finished this piece this morning, to be completely honest. And in the coming weeks, I'll have myself photographed wearing the swimsuit while actually in the river. Functioning much like my Python shorts, this auspicious swimsuit will provide the wearer with luck and power while looking for hellbenders, as well as thwarting the dangerous forces of the river. The suit is lined with a hand-dyed merino wool knit fabric, which is similar to the fabrics that early bathing suits were made of, from the 18th century right up to the 1950s. Wool is excellent for providing insulation while wet. The different colors of tiles are created by starting with a white porcelain and a black stoneware, and then blending the two clays together incrementally to create the gradient effect. I've got 15 different shades of clay from top to bottom in this piece. And to see more of my work in person, please visit my show with Corn Wagon Thunder, I Is Another, which is going to open in March. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you all.
That was superb. Really remarkable stuff, Shae. Thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you, Bob.
I knew he would have everybody on the edge of their seats. That work is just remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I started out a little bit skeptical, and I'm absolutely entranced by the end here. This is great.
I just have to draw you into my world.
Yeah, well, you did. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Really, I'm so excited. It's the pleasure of the job that I do, that I meet people like Shae and Corn, and get to know them over a period of time, and then have these very inspiring conversations and learn more about them and their work. And then it all comes together, and I get to handle their work and be part of the process. For these two-person shows, I really do invite them to be part of the way that we design the exhibition. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. So I hope that everyone will be able to come and see it. But thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about the show, and I hope that we can drag a few people either out of Kentucky or up from Asheville to come see the show. So thank you.
I hope so too. I've really missed having Penland be the vibrant place that it usually is this year.
I am totally speechless. And most of you who know me know that is hard to believe. I am completely blown away. Shae, I've got 1,000 things I want to ask you. Some of the things that I'm doing in my studio, and I'm really a novice, really parallels a bit of your journey. And I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I'd love to be able to just send you an email if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
So this is very, very exciting. And I just have, about how long does it take to make, say, that vest, start to finish?
The vest was one of my, well, the long vest or the short vest? It's kind of different, fairly different answers for those two pieces. But to generalize, I would say most of my wearable garments, I spend between 3 and 9 months is usually the range of time that I spend on one of those pieces. So in practice, I generally end up producing about one per year. Because I also make other things simultaneously. A large part of the process is very slow and repetitive while I'm making tiles, day after day after day as I amass the 1,000 or more required. So it makes for sometimes a bit of tedium, and I like to make pieces like my illustrated wall tiles, and then also sew clothing, and I make cups and smaller pieces at the same time as well to keep things interesting.
I'd like to ask this. I'm familiar with Hadley Pottery in Kentucky. And since you grew up there, and since we have a number of people here from Kentucky, I'm wondering about any influences that you picked up early that are now showing up in your work or in your inspiration.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I did a school report on Hadley pottery and Louisville stoneware when I was in middle school, but to be honest, I don't remember that much from the report. What I do remember very clearly is a few people who were really important teachers and role models to me and brought me into the ceramic arts very young, because I started taking ceramic classes every week, starting when I was 9 years old and continuing up to my ceramic practice today. But I first saw a clay artist at a school festival who was making little ceramic reptiles out of clay very quickly. And I was standing there transfixed. I was so excited. And my parents went up to him later after I had left and asked if he ever took students. And he agreed to take me on a trial basis, and we shared so many interests. I ended up hanging out and making clay things with that artist, Brian Newton, for all the way until I moved away for college. And so, you know, sometimes just a little thing, being interested in seeing somebody make something one time when you're a kid can end up kind of changing the whole course of your life. So.
Well, I know that my friends who are on here from Kentucky are not shy. I also know that my friend Jane collects Hadley and has done so for years. Would any of you like to comment on what you've seen today and how it might relate to your awareness of ceramic arts in your area? Really? I can't get anybody to speak up.
No worries, Louise. No worries. Hopefully it just means that I explained myself thoroughly.
Well, you did a wonderful job. And so I have one more question that I posted. Catherine, I don't know if you saw it.
What was that, the one about Harvey?
Well, you've mentioned about the Littletons several times in your presentation, and I'm not sure people understand what that's about.
No, I apologize for that. I'm afraid that their names are just like so ingrained in my being that I forget that other people don't know. Harvey Littleton, who has passed away, he was considered one of the fathers of the American glass movement. He started out in ceramics and eventually came to the Penland area, but worked on developing the first studio setup of glass, and went on to be very well respected and well known in the glass field. And his entire family was part of a glass world from then on. John, his son, became a glass artist, married Kate Vogel, and they work in Bakersville, which is not so far away. One daughter had a glass gallery in Washington, D.C. Another son runs what's called, we refer to as the batch plant, which is actually a place that manufactures pelletized glass and sells glass products all over the world, but is right here in Spruce Pine. And another daughter maintained his vitriography studio in Spruce Pine until he passed. So he's kind of a legend. But like Mark Pizer, and if people don't know who Mark is truly one of the most remarkable glass artists I've ever met. He is a research and development person. He has done things with glass that people never thought was possible. I believe that there's a number of pieces in the permanent collection, Asheville Art Museum. And to this day, he's still working. He's not a young man, but what he's done that's so wonderful at Penland is that he's taken people who are equally interested. There was one of our resident artists was very interested in casting. He taught them a lot. And then the gentleman who runs our glass studio now, Nick Fruin, who is very interested in the chemical properties of glass, it's kind of like two artistic nerds geeking out on glass chemistry. And for somebody like Mark, who has this, international reputation, to take on young artists, it's the really most remarkable thing that happens at Penland. So we are very fortunate to have, there's such a huge list of people who are notable, exceptional, influential artists who came to Penland one time and just it's stuck in their world, and they are, it's part of them, and they stayed in the area, and they have influenced the craft world in more ways than we could probably ever list. So
we have one more question that I can see. This is from my friend Ina Davis in New Orleans. And she wanted to know from Shae, when did you start making glazes? And at what age did you start working in ceramics? So we heard age 9.
Yeah. Started working in ceramics at age 9, and started making my own glazes a little bit later, more like when I went to college, so about 17.
Well,
but yeah, ceramics has been part of my life pretty much forever at this point.
So this has really been lovely. I'm going to write a journal, which I do each day, and I cover what we saw in the presentation from the day before, and I also discuss what you're going to see tomorrow. So I have a bunch of things to add about my friends Kate and John and Littleton's, and I'll just put it in there. And tomorrow, we will see, I think Jordan actually is on here. Jordan, who is the gallery director at Momentum, which is a really beautiful gallery in Asheville. And there's so much to see. Jordan, would you like to say anything about tomorrow?
Hi, Louise. Can you hear me?
Jordan, hi.
Hi. Oh, Shae, really enjoyed your presentation, and fantastic pictures, fantastic information. You can tell you really put a lot of thought into your work, and just technically, it's just stunning too. So, kudos to you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tomorrow I'm really excited to be a part of this and present what we're doing here at Momentum to this group, and we're going to introduce a number of artists that we show here at the gallery, and maybe talk a little bit about our upcoming move into our new space we're on the precipice of after quite a long construction project. I keep getting asked, when are we opening? It's coming up very soon. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit. A focus on a few of our local artists that we show at the gallery, and yeah, about that probably. We've got, hopefully it'll be interesting and entertaining for everyone.
Thank you, Jordan. We're looking forward to it. I really want to thank Catherine and Shae, and I'd also like to mention to any of you who've super enjoyed what they've seen today to comment, to send me responses, testimonials. We're collecting all of that. With your permission, we're posting some of it back on social media. We are including it in journals, and it's sort of an opportunity to reminisce and perhaps to do better in the future on anything that we haven't done quite right. I'd also like you to pass this on to your friends and let them know that if they can still buy a ticket, as long as we know about 3:30 tomorrow, they can still go with us to Momentum at 5 o'clock. You will get, when all of this is said and done and Bob has a chance to catch his breath, you will get videos of each of the gallery programs. So that's 10 videos for $55 plus the ones that you've seen live. So we will continue to sell tickets. We'll continue to invite you in. Bob, would you like to talk about any of that?
Just to say that it will happen. It will be a little bit after the series concludes here. And I will say that each day I follow this up the following day with a little email that has got links to the to Penland, to the shop, and to the artists that we have seen here and on earlier days. So you're building a cumulative list here. By the end of this, you'll have websites for everybody that you've seen on the series. So just pay attention and watch out for those emails to come through. Thank you all very much. Shae, I am astounded at how articulate you were, as well as being a superb artist here. So thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll see you all tomorrow at Momentum, okay?
Thank you for pulling all this together.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.